I did my pediatric training at Johns Hopkins, and we were involved in the care of many different genetic conditions, but the one that made the biggest impression on me was cystic fibrosis, both because we had quite a few patients that were in the hospital all the time, and because we had treatments that were partially effective but really weren't in many ways changing the long-term outcomes for that condition. So I learned how to be really good at applying those partially effective therapies for nutrition and airway clearance and antibiotics that we were working with at the time. So I got to be good at that, but I recognized that we were coming up against a brick wall at a certain point, because those things were really, they were extending life, extending quality of life, but not making a definitive change. So I had the opportunity to take a little bit of a detour and spend 3 years just immersed in a lab where there were no other physicians, just working on trying to create a vehicle to put the normal gene into the lungs of the patients, what we call a gene therapy vector now. So I started in that work really early on in the story of gene therapy in the late 1980s. And so what ended up happening is we developed a gene vector for cystic fibrosis, and ultimately tested it in patients. And in the course of that, found reasons why that was not the vector we had was not a good fit for cells in the lung, because those cells were turning over and it wasn't set up to work that way. But because we were the first to use this particular virus, we got some great experience that then we've been able to help to apply to other genetic diseases. So the vector that we use is called AAV, and it turns out now that while it is not an ideal vector for the cells in the lung that are affected in cystic fibrosis, it's very good for cells in the brain and spinal cord and in the retina of the eye and the muscle and liver. And so in my research program, we got involved in some of those things. And then also I got into leadership because we'd had this early experience, and because I did sort of see how the research could pull together with the clinical care, and so ended up leading a gene therapy center and a pediatrics department, and now a medical school where we try to bring together the science with the treatment in ways that can help patients.